Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First in the Credit Contracts and Financial Services Law Reform Bill. Mr Chairman, we discussed this at length at our caucus meeting on Tuesday and it got a full and robust discussion. The Minister is not going to like this, but I have to inform the Minister that New Zealand First is not going to now be supporting this bill. The reason being that we brought it to the House's attention a week or so ago, how disappointed we were that caps were not going to be put in place on interest rates in this particular bill. During that speech that I gave previously, we pointed out that interest rate caps were applicable in Australia, in the United Kingdom, in Canada, the United States, all sorts of other jurisdictions. They do apply, and countries that we would consider who are our sister countries in many aspects see fit to have such caps on their interest rates, and yet this government has determined it will not include that in this legislation. As a result of that, New Zealand First feels that we cannot support the overall bill because we feel that that leaves such a huge gaping hole in the legislation that will still allow unscrupulous racketeers, loan sharks and such like to continue to peddle their ways in parts of New Zealand where our people are most vulnerable. And we know where those places are, particularly the Minister referred to South Auckland and some other areas where low-income families are suffering. Porirua, parts of Christchurch, parts of Hawke's Bay. We know all the places where this sort of activity is going on and where interest rates can go to triple-digit interest rates compounding. And in that situation, it is just appalling that this government has not seen fit to mirror the situation in Australia and the likes of Canada where they have put these in place. We just can't understand the rationale why the government would not include that. This bill had so much potential. New Zealand First has said so many times in this House, we will support good legislation, but we will point out where legislation is sadly wanting. In this case, this legislation is sadly wanting because it leaves a gap where you could drive a whole truck, bus and anything else like that through it. Mr Chair, it is most disappointing that SOP that was put up a week or so ago by Carol Beaumont and the Labour Party was voted down, and it was lost by one vote. And it was lost by the vote of the Honourable Peter Dunn. And had he voted for it, it would have gone through and we would have had interest rate caps included in this bill. And it was most disappointing the fact that the Honourable Peter Dunn and the United Future Party stands for supposedly family values and all sorts of other principles that they say they espouse, but he would not stand up for a situation where many of his own supporters, we have been advised, thought that it was only right that caps be put on interest rates. And yet the Honourable Peter Dunn, when there was a members' bill a few years ago, which was called the 2010, the Credit Reforms Responsible Lending Bill, which was a private members' bill brought by Carol Beaumont, which originally was put together by Charles Chevelle. Honourable Peter Dunn voted for that particular bill and in fact wrote a letter which I read out 2 weeks ago saying that he was in support of it. And he says, "I hope that further progress will be made on this issue in the future." So we have a minister who says in 2010 he hopes that it would go through and that it would be supported and that progress would be made in the future, but 4 years later, conveniently, because obviously under instruction of the government, he determines he will vote with the government, he allows that to be voted down. That is very disappointing, and the people of Ohio, quite rightly, should be aware, and particularly those who are subject to unscrupulous money lenders, should be aware that their Member of Parliament there is voting against putting a lid and a cap on extortionate interest rates to their people. Mr Chair.
Andrew Williams.
Mr Chair, so it is with regret that New Zealand First has to advise the Minister and the Government that until such time as they review this and look at putting a limit on interest rates and controls on the interest rates and the levels of interest rates that can be charged in this country, we just simply cannot support it. We think it leaves vulnerable people in a very, very difficult situation again, regardless of all the fine print, regardless of how the contracts are written, regardless how, and we've heard from the Minister how they're told and they're supposedly explained how things will be. It doesn't make a jot of difference if at the end of the day the interest rates have no cap on them and they can be set at all sorts of levels and that they can be compounding and that the amount of repayments can start exploding beyond all belief. And at the end of the day, they will get around it through the fine print, and they will continue to act in this manner. And we will have people who could badly do with protection from this Parliament and from this government being left paying huge amounts while that money should be going for the health, welfare of their children and their families. So, Mr Speaker, New Zealand First will be voting against this bill.
Te ura Flavel.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā tātou katoa. Tātou e hui nei tēnei pō. Mr Speaker, I'm standing on behalf of the Māori Party to talk.